Good morning. This one is going to be about books and why masters hated writing down things. It was often the apprentices who took notes, and that's how we probably got, the information. It's secondhand, information. Plato said, "Wonder is the beginning of philosophy." There are some books out there, you know, the Eddas, the great epics from the Greeks or the Indians or the Mesopotamians or the Anglo Saxons. Of these quote unquote books, many existed long before they were written. Yes, these epics, these works, they existed long before they were written down. Many have never been written down, others have been or will be lost. It is more likely that you will learn from a master than from a book or from education, from whatever. That's a thing that is missing nowadays. Masters, yeah, who actually know what they're talking about. I'm going to read some lines. It requires a combined effort of the reason and the imagination to conceive a poet as a person who cannot write, singing or reciting his verses to an audience that cannot read. The ability of oral tradition to transmit great masses of verse for hundreds of years is proved and admired. To this oral literature, as the French call it, education is not a friend. Culture destroys it, sometimes with amazing rapidity. When a nation begins to read, what was once the possession of the folk as a whole becomes the heritage of the illiterate only, and soon, unless it is gathered up by the antiquaries, vanishes all together. Okay, I just wanted to comment that this concept of a nation is quite recent. Okay, a nation is like a corporation. People, get in and out of power that run this nation, often with no accountability, and they are in it for their own interests. It's almost like a farm or a plantation or whatever. The CEOs, the ones who are in charge, they are in it for the profit, and they pass, this system to, anyone else that is, following the same or protecting the same interests. So in the past, we had cultures, right? Now we have nations. Nation is the enemy of culture, and they destroy culture with what they call education. All right, let us continue. Mark too that this oral literature once belonged to quote the whole people, the community whose intellectual interests are the same from the top of the social structure to the bottom, while in the reading society it is accessible only to the antiquaries and is no longer bound up with the everyday life. A point of further importance is this: that the traditional oral literatures interested not only the all classes but also all ages of the population, while the books that are nowadays written expressly for children are such as no mature mind could tolerate. It is now only the comic strips that appeal alike to children who have been given nothing better and are at the same time to adults who have never grown up. You see, there's a dumbing down of the masses. In other words, universal compulsory education of the type introduced at the end of the last century has not fulfilled expectations by producing happier and more effective citizens. On the contrary, it has created readers of the yellow press and cinema goers. Yeah. They are highly suggestible to propaganda, you know, propaganda in the newspapers, in the television, in the cinema. Basically, culture, information, knowledge, wisdom is blocked out of the masses. And this information is then, uh, taken refuge in, specific books. So having access to those books becomes problematic. Books can be easily restricted. Well, they used to. Now with the internet, you can find them all over the place. There's still good souls out there. Just put them out for free and for in PDF format. You can download it, but they are long gone out of print. Um, so knowledge and it's still, it's confined in specific books, and they are trillions of books out there, and it's like 0.000%, 1%. That's actually good, you know so finding the good books is it's difficult, and culture can only be found in those books. In the mainstream, quote unquote, you won't find any culture. Zero. So let us continue. There was this guy called Saint Barbey Baker. I think he's some kind of those evangelicals. Saint Barbey Baker tells us that in Central Africa, my trusted my trusted friend and companion was an old man who could not read or write. Though well versed in stories of the past, the old chiefs listened enthralled. Under the present system of education, there is a grave risk that much of this way be lost. Mr. Archer points out, I don't know who this is. Mr. Archer points out maybe in the 1910s, this Archer was a VIP. Anyway, Archer points out that unlike the English system, in which one could pass one's life without coming into contact with poetry, the Urahon tribal system uses poetry as a vital appendix to dancing, marriages, and the cultivation of a crop, functions in which all Urahons join as part of their tribal life, adding that if we have to single out the factor which caused the decline of English village culture, we should have to say it was literacy. In an older England, as Prior and Gardner remind us, even the ignorant and unlettered man could read the meaning of sculptures that now only the trained archaeologists can interpret. Right. So This reminds me of Lysenkoism for some reason. In a tribal system, people are constantly chatting, singing, dancing, yeah, and they use this is our forms of art, of course, and art is what the language of the spiritual, right? So people are constantly it's what causes people to come together is spirituality. They share, and unconsciously this thing just becomes part of the daily life, and it bounds people together. It's what we call culture, and a tribe or a culture. That's how culture emanates. So everything they do, comes from the heart. It's agriculture or building things or creating things. It becomes part of the everyday life, and it encapsulates not only the children. It encapsulates the grown-ups and the elderly, and everybody is connected. You know, everybody is connected, and it's a sort of it's a sort of poetry. It just emanates from the spiritual. Why does this have to do with Lysenkoism? Lysenkoism was this, theory of the Marxists that if they read, the manifesto to the crops, things would grow faster or something in those lines. It was pseudoscience. I think they were trying to emulate, what naturally emanates from the spirit. Uh, anyway, moving forward. It was like an artificial way. Of course, it was not going to work because those Marxists, it's anti-human basically. It's anti-natural order. So whatever they were trying to do is the opposite of what they should be doing. So let us continue. From the Indian point of view, a man can only be said to know what he knows by heart, what he must go to a book when I'm sorry what he oh merde I'm sorry, let me repeat that. From the Indian point of view, a man can only be said to know what he knows by heart, what he must go to a book to be reminded of, he merely knows of. So basically, if you require a book to remind you of something, it means you don't know it intimately. You don't know it spiritually. Basically, you're ignorant. There are hundreds of thousands of Indians even now who daily repeat from knowledge by heart either the whole or some large part of the Bhagavad Gita. Others, more learned, can recite hundreds of thousands of verses of longer texts. It was from a it was from a traveling villager, singer in Kashmir that I first heard sung the odes of the classical Persian poet Jalaluddin Rumi. From the earliest times, Indians have thought of the learned man not as one who has read much, but as one who has been profoundly taught, because it is much rather from a master than from a book that wisdom can be learned. Yes? The distinction is largely of poetry from prose and myth from facts. The quality of oral literature is essentially poetical, its content essentially mythical, and its preoccupation with the spiritual adventure of the heroes. The quality of originally written literature is essentially prosaic, its content literal, and its preoccupation with secular events and with personalities. So, let me uh, comment here. The quality of oral tradition, the oral literature, is mainly poetical, i.e., spiritual. Yeah, it's spiritual. It's poetical. No wonder, the hero's journey, comes to mind. It's poetical. It's spiritual. And the other type of literature, the one who is prosaic, yeah, it's mainly concerned with secular events and personalities. So it's more narcissistic. You know, this is just my 2 cents. It's more narcissistic. Plato maintains that one who is in earnest will not write, but teach, and that if the wise man writes at all, it will be either only for amusement, for the mere belles lettres, or to provide reminders for himself when his memory is weakened by old age. Old age, we start forgetting things. That's why intelligence is not that important. What is important is wisdom. Wisdom is transcendent. Intelligence, you can have, old age, you can have an accident, something, that wipes your memory. And intelligence is worthless. Wisdom is transcendent. That you will never lose. So we know exactly what Plato means by the words in earnest. It is not about human affairs or personalities, but about the eternal verities, the nature of the real being, and the nourishment of our immortal part, that the wise man will be in earnest. Our mortal part can survive by bread alone, but it is by the myth that our inner man is fed. Or, if we substitute for the true myths, the propagandist myths of, I don't know, progress, race baiting, uplift, and civilizing missions, being an evangelist, the inner man starves. The written text, as Plato says, can serve those whose memories have been weakened by old age. Thus, it is that in this senility of culture, we have found it necessary to preserve the masterpieces of art in museums, and at the same time to record in writing and so also to preserve as much as can be collected of oral literatures that would otherwise be lost forever, and this must be done before it's too late. By the way, this type of preservation to preserve these collective, literature, and put them in museums, it's no different than a mausoleum. It's no different than a grave burial. You know, you're just putting them in a coffin somewhere, and only few people will get interested by those. It's not going to be mainstream. It's not going to be in education or in television. No, most people are going to miss it. It's going to end up forgotten. All serious students of human societies have agreed that agriculture and handicraft are essential foundations of any civilization. The primary meaning of the word being that of making a home for oneself. Where is your home? Is where your heart is. Where is your culture? Where is your home? That bonding experience when people use poetry, when they are doing agriculture or building things with their hands. Indirectly, they are creating this, you know, thing called culture. It's the place that we call home. Yeah. A nation, on the other hand, is artificial. Yeah. It's pathological. It's unnatural. It's just. Anyway, is this the end? Oh no, I still have another paragraph. Yeah, this is the end, I think. Our real concern is with the fallacy involved in the attachment of an absolute value to literacy and the very dangerous consequences that are involved in the setting up of literacy as a standard by which to measure the cultures of unlettered peoples. Our blind faith in literacy not only obscures us from the significance of other skills, so that we care not under what subhuman conditions a man may have learn to learn his living, if only he can read, no matter what, in his hours of leisure. It is also one of the fundamental grounds of interracial prejudice and becomes a prime factor in the spiritual impoverishment of all the quote unquote backward people whom we propose to civilize. References. Reading, for a man devoid of prior understanding, is like a blind man looking into a mirror. Yes. In spite of the alleged great spread of literacy in the world, the proportion of population who can communicate with each other or relatively on a relatively high level of discourse is very much smaller than it used to be. Yeah. I don't know if I should read this one. Okay, the poorest classes generally speak the language admirably. Some recited thousands of lines of ancient heroic poems. Another cause of the fragmentary character of some tales is the obliterating effect of modern civilizations. This intellectual inheritance, this ancient culture extended all over the north and northerly islands of Scotland. The people who possessed this culture may have been, and usually were, unlettered. They were far from being uneducated. It is said to think that its decay has been partly due to schools and church. It is, in fact, precisely by the schools and church that the decay of cultures all over the world has been hasted in the last 100 years. There was something specific about the Irish. Where is it? Can't find it. Oh, there it is. Douglas Hyde remarks that in vain have disinterested visitors opened wide eyes of astonishment and schoolmasters who knew no Irish being appointed to teach pupils who knew no English. Intelligent children endowed with a vocabulary in everyday use of about 3,000 words entered the schools of the chief commissioner, to come out at the end with their natural vivacity gone, their intelligence almost completely sapped, their splendid command of their native language lost forever, and a vocabulary of 500 or 600 English words, badly pronounced and barbarously employed, substitute for it. This is what happened recently, right? But it's happening all over the world. Like in that saying, misery loves company, you know. And these evangelists, they feel like there's a mandate to spread misery all over the world. We have to spread literacy, they say. Right. It just, drains people out of their spirituality, and it makes them more susceptible to propaganda. Often people call this imperialism, colonialism, or whatever. Anyway, have a nice day.